Hey up and welcome to the Strategy Sessions. My name's Andy Jarvis and thank you for joining me today. We're on episode 7 and we're going to call this episode 7th Tackle. Why? Well, we're talking rugby and sport marketing today. We're joined by Mick Hogan. Mick is the former CEO of some of the biggest names in the rugby world. Wigan Warriors, probably one of the best known rugby league clubs in the world. Newcastle Falcons, Newcastle Thunder, Gateshead Thunder, a startup in the rugby league world, which we talk about, and also Sale Sharks as well. So he's got a career in sport marketing. He's worked at Premier Rugby, he's worked on the Rugby Union World Cup, he's currently working on the Rugby League World Cup. He's got a really interesting background, and as the rugby season is coming back in August, I thought now is the time to drop in an interview with Mick. But we've also got Helen Pollitt, who is coming up any moment now. We'll introduce Helen, who's going to talk a little bit about analytics and reporting and has a real interesting way to look at that. But before we get started, I just want to say thank you again to the sponsors, Moyi Coffee. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. You can't be on YouTube without saying that these days, can you? Anyway, don't worry. There's a bag of Moyi Coffee, lovely bright pink bags. Great branding, but also great coffee. You can find more about them at Moyi Coffee. That's Moyee Coffee, COFFEE. .ie or .co.uk, moyeecoffee.co.uk, moyeecoffee.ie. They use blockchain to help connect drinkers to the producers, and they are trying to pay a living wage to coffee producers in Kenya and Ethiopia, where they buy their coffee from. So please do check them out, moyeecoffee.ie or .co.uk. But yeah, we're here, and let's talk about the first guest. We've got Helen Pollitt from Arrows Up. In episode 1, if you were listening back then, Jen Hoffman and I were talking about somebody who created a presentation at a digital conference talking about a way of viewing reports and analytics. And for the life of us, neither of us could remember Helen's name, which was really, really embarrassing. And I think I corrected it in social posts and obviously in the outros and stuff when I was talking about it. But look, I've met Helen at several conferences. Brilliant speaker, really funny, really witty and engaging, but also opens your eyes to how you should be thinking about reporting. So Helen, talk to us about reports. Yeah, here you go.
Hi, my name's Helen Pollitt and I'm the Managing Director at Arrows Up. Now this is a tip for anyone who's ever worked in a marketing agency and thought, why am I bothering with this marketing report? My client never reads them. This is the tip. Think about the value that your reports are actually providing to your clients. Stop including safe data, those kind of metrics that you just include in the report because you've seen other people include them in marketing reports. Things that are so top level and generic that they're not actually providing any insight for your clients specific to their marketing goals. Things like site-wide bounce rate. At best, clients ignore them. At worst, they ask questions about them. And then you have to explain that actually as a metric, they're kind of useless. Stop including data that has no context. You can provide a lot of context for your clients that's genuinely useful. Things like Google Trends about their industry, information about the competitors and what they're up to, just general information about the economy, all stuff that might directly relate to the success of the particular marketing that you are working on. Include that in your reports where you can. And finally, no more assuming that the data just speaks for itself. Just because you've included a chart or a graph or a table does not mean the client understands what you're getting at. Make sure you provide information that they can understand, and that's usually written insight. That's what they are paying you for, and that's what really does provide them with good value. So those are my tips for taking boring reports and making them super useful for your clients. If you want to find out more, then you can follow me at HelenPollitt1 on Twitter.
Helen, thank you very much for that. I really enjoy listening to Helen, and if you do get a chance to work with her, please do give her a shout, or if you want to book her for an event to come and speak when events come back, or even remotely, just do, because she's brilliant. You'll really enjoy that. Also want to give another shout to another partner in the show, Inside Voice. Aaron and Pablo do the production of the show, which is why if you are listening to the audio version, it sounds a damn sight better than the YouTube version. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to edit better, which is why the YouTube version's a bit shit sometimes. And I'm also going to get a better camera soon. But let's not worry about what's not there. Let's worry about what is here. Let's talk about the good stuff. I want to just follow on and tell you a little bit more about questions and asking questions based on what I've been talking about in the last few shows. So if you've been a regular listener I've talked about the 7 questions framework that I have, which sort of generated a lot of interest. People quite interested in how the framework works and what questions are in it and that type of thing. But I want to talk a bit more specifically about asking better questions and asking the right questions today, because I think it's important in marketing that we start to do that. And especially if you're a consultant or an agency, asking better questions is a way to do better work. Now, there's a real push and a real tension sometimes when you're in an agency or in a consultancy role to go in with answers. You're brought in because there is a problem. Otherwise, they wouldn't be talking to you. They have a problem they need solving. The problems may be greater or smaller. They may be quite tactical. They may be strategic. It doesn't matter what it is. But the only reason you're in the room is because they have a problem. No one wants to just give you the money. They have a problem. They need it solving. You're the person to do it. So there's a real push, a real tension that they want you to come in and start giving them answers right away. But what that leads to is really, really bad diagnosis. And if your diagnosis is wrong, your answers are going to be wrong. If you go to the doctors and you go in, and as you sit down, the doctor says, here's what we're going to do for you. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. Well, I don't know what's wrong with me, X. I've not really told them. Well, they ask you one question and you go, I feel a bit under the weather. I know what's wrong with you. And they give you a prescription. They don't know. But it's almost a microcosm of what happens in the marketing world. Marketers, loads of experience, go in and they sit down, you have an hour's coffee with a client, and then you give them the answers to their problem. Now, I've consulted in businesses that have had one person working in them, startups, micro businesses like that, and I've worked with high street names and businesses with thousands of employees and everything in between. And the only thing I can tell you is that you can't find out everything about that company in an hour. You can't find out anywhere near enough about that company in an hour. All you can do is get some headlines of what the person you're talking to thinks the problem might be. That's the best you're going to get. And if that's what you take and then you start answering, you're the doctor who's just come in and found out someone's under the weather and given them a penicillin prescription. You need to dig and get under the skin. Now, I saw a tweet from Will Reynolds, which I'm going to try and find and put in the show notes. Will Reynolds runs SEA Interactive in Philadelphia, big agency in the US. So he doesn't run it anymore. So he founded it. He stepped back from running it. But it's still involved. And he talked, I think he said, ask 5 questions before you even start answering, which I thought was a really interesting way. I'm not sure I agree with the number. It might have been 5, it might have been 7. But the whole process is about you ask questions and listen to the answers. Because when you're consulting, when you're in an agency, the key thing at that first engagement stage isn't about you. It's about them. You've got to understand the problems and the pain points that your client is feeling. So if you can start to pick that up, you can only do that by asking more questions and asking better questions so you get better information. Now, I'm not going to talk to them about, you need to be asking open questions, not closed questions, because there's times when closed questions are really, really important, and there's a reason why you want to do that. And there's times when open questions are really important as well. But the whole point is that I think you need to structure how you ask questions. So that's what the 7 questions framework is for me. It's a structure. So it's not saying you have to ask these questions before you start giving answers. It's saying you have to ask them in this order. So you start wide and narrow. And you're asking them and you're collecting information along the way that is helping you get the things you need out of your client. Because, look, it's marketing guesswork at best. And at worst, it's just making shit up, right? That you are going in, spending an hour with someone, having a coffee, doing a bit of Googling about them, running it through a few tools, and then going back and say in another hour meeting, going, here's how we will solve your problem. At best, it's guesswork. At worst, it's lying, right? That's it. So I think you need a structure, a process to then be able to start pulling the information out of working with your clients. Some people call it the discovery phase. Some people call it onboarding. Some people call it strategy. It depends on what your overall aim is, but the process of asking better questions is crucial to answering the right question. You ask better questions, you actually find out what the main pain point is. You can then solve that pain point for your client in a better way than you could have done beforehand. Now, it takes time to be able to do this. You can't just whack the questions down in an order. One of the things I do with clients is I help them work this through, and certainly with agencies anyways, to help them find better ways to ask questions, a strategic framework to be able to pull that information out of working with clients. So it becomes a paid piece of work, and it's great for them. But also when I work with other industries away from agency world, I spend my time refining how to ask those questions and doing that better. So I think I understand the difficulty, but really sit down and have a plan before you go into a meeting with a client, or before you go into those sort of pressure situations, and work out what questions do you want to ask, and road test them, try them with people and go, do you know what, actually, that feels like we're asking the same thing again. So let's just go back to the beginning and maybe we should ask those two questions together. Okay. And you find a natural rhythm to ask the questions in. Still gives you a chance to spark off what they said and move things about, but it gives you that process and that step to do it. And if you do that, you start asking better questions, you get better answers. You get better answers, you've got better information. If you've got better information, you can then start to deliver better services for the people who you paid to do that for. Question everything. My favorite two words when put together in the English language. And maybe that's pint, please. I'm not sure. But look, question everything is just a great philosophy for life, right? Whatever comes across, question everything. And take that with you for today. And thus ends my TED Talk. So thank you for listening. Right. Enough of me talking about questions. You can now listen to me asking Mick Hogan some questions. This interview was recorded. It was probably only the second ever, maybe the third ever interview I recorded. I was going to push it out earlier, but with coronavirus kind of scrapping all sports, it just felt like the wrong time to be putting any sports-related content out. So I've hung on till now. So yes, this interview is probably a couple of months old now, but most of it still stacks up. And Mick is a friend. So if it sounds like a chat between two old mates, it's because it is. Mick was already at Gates of Thunder when I went up to Newcastle to go to university there. I played for the student team. Mick was the coach of the North East Students team. I played in the North East Students team in 3 years in on the spin. And in the second year of that, we played the National Students Competition in Manchester. I'm not going to be bragging and say I was the top scorer in the competition, but I was the top scorer in the competition. I was the goal kicker for the North East. We had a couple of guys who went on to play pro. Andy Raleigh, who played for Huddersfield for years. Andy Rigby could have Andy Rigby, he could have gone pro, but he was a bit too lazy. Hi, Andy, if you're listening. And we had a great team. I played on the wing outside a guy called Mickey Walker, who was the best centre in the competition. Unfortunately, the slowest guy in the competition too. So he'd make a break, pass me the ball, and all I basically did all for the whole weekend was catch the ball and fall over. That was it, right? Caught the ball, fell over the line, scored a point, kicked the goals. But the stats looked amazing. I didn't necessarily have a stellar tournament, but my stats looked amazing. So when the Great Britain coach came to talk to our head coach, Mick Hogan, he started and he's like, right, look at some of your guys. And Mick, he was going down the list saying, Andy Raleigh, he should go on the Great Britain tour. Yeah. Andy Rigby, yeah, he should go. Mickey, yeah. Andy Jarvis. And he said, Jarvo? Yeah. Nah, he's shit. Don't send him. And that was where my international rugby career ended. On the words of Mick Hogan. So with no further ado, here's Mick talking about rugby, sport marketing, and strangely, Russ Abbott as well. But it's interesting. So here you go. Today, I would like to welcome a man who has spent his career in sport marketing. Mick Hogan worked at Gates of Thunder, launching the new team into the Super League. He's worked at some of the biggest clubs in the rugby clubs in the world and has worked on not one, but 2 World Cups. Mick, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Fine. And you're based in Newcastle now. How's Newcastle at the moment?
It's bright and sunny, which are not words normally associated with Newcastle, but we'll take it while it lasts, yeah?
Definitely. Well, look, let's get straight in and talk about Newcastle Thunder, who previously were Gateshead Thunder. You were there right at the beginning of that Super League journey.
Yeah, so over 20 years ago now, so in 1999, a bid had been put together to basically start a new franchise up in the Northeast, based at Gateshead International Stadium. Leapfrog every division underneath and go straight into Super League. So a number of other cities and areas bid for it as well. We were lucky enough to get it. Unfortunately, though, we only had one season in there before the team was merged with Hull and moved down the East Coast to the East Riding of Yorkshire.
So a merger only separated by 150 miles by road, was it?
Yeah, it's not a conventional merger. Effectively, there were 14 teams in the Super League at the time, and I think the sport, during one of its many rationalisation periods, decided that there was 12, and for any clubs that would agree to merge, you got double the money. And Gateshead, it had a future. I think a few things counted against it in that we had less funding than anybody else, and the stadium, although it's a great stadium, it's an athletic stadium. It's not conducive to a really good customer experience. So quite a few things like that didn't quite kick in year one, and the owners as a whole decided to merge, take double the money. And to be fair, if you're going to continue a rugby league presence in either Hull or Gateshead, you're probably going to back the safer option, and that was Hull.
So there's a couple of interesting points there. Rugby league, for those who don't know, is often characterised as a parochial sport based quite a lot about across the M62 in the north of England. As a rugby league fan, I would kind of disagree with the parochial nature of it. I think it's a strength rather than a weakness. But you launched a new product in a new market. It's not a traditional rugby league area. What challenges did you face then?
I think the biggest challenge was finding a customer base immediately, because unlike a lot of products, and particularly at the time as well, before the internet really was kicking in, it wasn't something that you could, we weren't in the global society that we are now. So we had to find a support base pretty quickly. The numbers that have been put together as well have been put together on a few rugby league internationals that have been played there, and one or two Super League on the road games. Let's just say those numbers were ambitious. So I think the new owners that came in Shane Richardson and Kath Etherington perhaps didn't have the full story on which to base a club on. In theory, it could and should work, and actually is working now, because you've got an entire region really that only one club serves. So, but perhaps it was just a bit too ahead of its time. It could have been, done perhaps 2, 3, 4 years further down the line when some more foundation work was in there. But everybody's wise in hindsight, aren't they?
Definitely. And you came through, you were doing the community marketing, you were doing sort of community development work in the Northeast, and then moved from there into the marketing at Thunder, but kind of brought that strong community element with you. How did that help?
I think it's massive, because community work in sport, where we go out and we engage with schools and rugby clubs and different sectors of society. It's quite labour intensive, it's quite resource heavy, but I think it has probably one of the best returns you can get out of any form of marketing channel, because you're pretty much having a one-to-one conversation, albeit at a club or a school, and I think that passion that we had for the sport could really be, transcend over to primarily young people. Once you get people interested at a young age, particularly within sport, when they come along, they have to come along with their parents and families. And what we were finding was a lot of families were coming along for the first time, really enjoying the values of the sport and the congregational nature rather than the segregational nature that other sports have, and getting hooked at an early age. But what you find when you launch any new sport like that, and you're primarily talking to kids and families, is it becomes a generational project. And what we have now at the Thunder Reborn, albeit over in Newcastle, is we've got a generational project. We're looking over 20 years, because the reason that Newcastle United, or perhaps Wigan within rugby league, are more successful is, why did he go? Well, I went because my dad took me. And why did he go? Well, his mum took him. And, it's almost a rite of passage that is passed down through generations. And you'll have that, particularly within the established sports. And we don't have that in rugby league in the Northeast. To a degree, we don't have it within rugby union in the Northeast. It's primarily a football area. And until we get that, we won't really start to see the huge gains that perhaps we think we can get. But it's a long-term process, but it's one that I think establishes really firm foundations.
So one of the things you talk about in sport marketing, I know from my background in cricket, where one thing you can't control is the weather, so you don't worry about it. But talk to me about how it felt, having spent, you had sort of a good run up to the launch of Thunder. You had some internationals coming. You had a big game. I think it was Leeds in the opening game. Friday night, Gateshead Stadium. I think it was a Friday night at Gateshead Stadium.
Sunday night. So that's Sunday really night. Traditional sports love Sunday night, yeah.
Sunday night at Gateshead Stadium, and the worst storm possibly in the history of the Northeast hit over Gateshead Stadium that night. What does that do to you that day?
It's deflating. Let's say that. Had it not been our opening game, had the game not been on Sky, that game would not have taken place, because I was looking back actually a few weeks ago on some YouTube footage of the first game, and there's standing puddles of water on the pitch. It is absolutely monsoonal, and even by the northeast weather standards, it was pretty grim. So it is a bit deflating. It's like anybody that works in outdoor events, as you say, that the biggest factor is the weather, and we can't control it, and we can put contingencies in place, but when you go to an outdoor event, you don't want to be huddled at the back of the stand trying to get, with your primary focus, just trying to be keeping. It wasn't just rain as well; it was absolutely freezing.
I mean, I was there and it pissed it down. It was horrific. It was. I mean, I grew up watching rugby league at Odsal, which anyone who's been to Odsal, I think it's the highest sports ground in the UK. It's cold in July, and that night at Gateshead was one of the coldest nights I've ever had watching any sport anywhere ever.
Well, in any sporting event, when the halftime in the 70s, that the arc went straight over the middle of the pitch and sort of sailed through, it's pretty wet. It was just, and all the pre-match sort of razzmatazz that we planned, we had to curtail most of it, and and then we didn't, we got beat. We put up a reasonable performance, but it just did feel a bit deflating. I think we got a crowd of, it was about 4,500, 5,000. Without that weather, we genuinely think it would have been 8, 9, possibly even 10,000. And you get off to a really good start with crowd numbers like that, and you build momentum, and that's massive within sport marketing. It's building momentum and really getting on a roll, and it just drags other people in. We never got that big start, and we did okay over the summer, but I do think it set us back.
So to flip from one side of the rugby league marketing coin of Gateshead Thunder, completely new team, launching in a new market that's not a traditional rugby area. You've since worked at Wigan Warriors, chief executive at Wigan Warriors, one of the biggest names in the rugby world, either code, I would argue, and a real monster of rugby development. And, Wigan is just a hotbed. If you know anything about rugby, you'll know Wigan. What was that like then? What were the differences between Thunder and the Warriors?
I mean, it's just the scale of it. And as I say, it's got the generational support of over probably 120 years of history. There's a level of expectation as well, but it is just the thirst for knowledge and that supporter base that is in the town. I remember only being in a few weeks and walking around Tesco's on actually where the site of the old Central Park was, where Wigan used to paint, and having some sort of older bloke look at me, and he sort of half recognised me from the announcement, and then came over and in a nice, polite way, was just telling me how to do my job over the next few years and what he wanted from me. And it was presented in a very good way, but you don't really get that in many codes of rugby. It just is. And it's the whole weekend. So we played on a Friday night and lost at home. There were people still not over it by the Tuesday, Wednesday. If we won, then you'd see them all out in the town on this, whole families out decked, from head to toe in Wigan regalia, high-fiving you as you are walking down in Tesco. So it really did mean so much to those people. I'm not saying it didn't mean as much to the Thunder fans, but once you have a sport that's embedded in the community like Wigan, the way they were and the way they still are now, it is the life for so many people. We'd have a fans forum, and we'd had one at Gateshead, and probably 50 or 60 fans would turn up and listen to the owners and myself and the players talk about the club. At Wigan, they would queue outside to get into the fans forum. They actually paid money to come and listen to us, and it was 600 we could fit in this room, and it sold out. And a bit like your holiday when you go down and put your towel on the on your favourite sun lounger, these people are queuing for half an hour before it opened, ran to the front because he wanted to be on the front row, put the coats on the back of the chair, and then went over to the bar, which also wasn't great because it gave them 2 hours sort of, getting a bit down the neck. So they would ask the questions that perhaps they weren't going to ask by the time it comes round. So it was always entertaining. The feedback we got was brilliant. And I've taken that with me, that's gone through with me through my career. You've got to listen to the fans. You have to listen. And yes, surveys are great and reading fans forums are okay, but just get out and listen to them. So don't just stay up in the corporate areas because of the nice foods there and your top sponsors. They get down into the bars and talk to the general admission fans, because they'll probably tell you far, far more about how you're doing and what you're doing well, and more importantly, what you're not doing so well.
Mm-hmm. And give us, how big is Wigan as a town? Is it sort of 70, 80,000 people?
Yeah, I think it's about 80,000. You start to go into a few of the villages, you drag a few more in, but the challenge you've got within rugby league is as soon as you go outside of Wigan, you go into a town which has got another rugby league club. So it's a different sell. You really are selling within Wigan itself and the boundary, because you go over Billy and Chill, you go into St Helens. Good luck trying to sell Wigan in St Helens. You might have the odd fan here and there, but think of your biggest rivalries in the sport, and that is right up there.
Definitely. And it's hard if you don't know rugby league, if you're listening to this and going, what are they talking about? Wigan so we've got 80, 90,000 people in a town. There was one weekend a few years ago when England Rugby Union and England Rugby League played the same weekend. Now, there was 3 Wigan lads in the England Rugby Union team. So bear in mind, let's say half of the population of Wigan's female. So you're talking about 40 to 45,000 people. Some of them are kids, some of them are going to be older. So you're probably talking about a population of playing age that might be 15, 20,000 people. I think Owen Farrell, Chris Ashton and Joel Tompkins were playing for England Rugby Union, and about another 6 or 7, including Tompkins' brother, playing for the Rugby League team. That's a phenomenal amount of people, not just playing the game, but getting to the very, very top of the game. So when you're managing that and that level of expectation, but in such a small confine, does it feel a bit claustrophobic sometimes?
I don't know about claustrophobic, but I think it just means more to the fans. And, I've always, again, when you're trying to build a club, you build it on a strong academy, and that's where you produce your own players, your own local players coming through to the first team. And I would always argue that, forget Premiership football now, because that just goes out and buys what it wants. But the real dynasty teams in sport, certainly in British sport, have always had a strong academy. So your Leicester Tigers and Wasps always produced a lot of their own. St Helens and Wigan and even Leeds when they were strong within rugby league. I would argue that, when Durham were good at cricket, top of the pile at cricket, and even Lancashire in the 70s, they always had a core of the local players that produced themselves that had grown together. Man United in the 90s, that class of 92, that was who they built around, right? And what it allows you to do, actually, those players actually become probably cheaper to retain than bringing in. The loyalty is incredible. They set a really good culture throughout the club. But one of the other biggest reasons for why you should have an academy that produces like that is the fans connect with them in a way like they do no other players. Don't get me wrong. Everybody loves to see an overseas star come in. Everybody loves to see an international, perhaps from another part of the country, come in. But I will put to you that we've had Johnny Wilkinson, we've had Matt Burke at Newcastle Falcons, who have been involved for 20 years. Fantastic players, brilliant blokes. The one that the out-and-out Falcons fans love, though, are your likes of your Dave Walders and your Mickey Wards, particularly Mickey Wards, because they are
fans' favourite. Mickey Wards.
I don't know. He's a guy from Wallsend. He was only ever really going to play rugby. He'll tell you that. But you know what? He was such a fan favourite. He had time for the fans. He would go into the bar after the game and have a pint with them. Listen, win, lose, or draw. He would front up. And those are the types of guys. You can't have 50, you can't have a team full of them, but you want that good core in there. So yeah, it did feel a bit claustrophobic, but actually I've always seen it as an opportunity. And the more local lads you can get in your team, they've got to be of the right standard. Don't get me wrong, you can't put them in just because they're local, right? And I think, as an aside, the day sport, and you can see examples of it, starts to choose players because they are from a particular region or country or part of the world for marketing purposes. I think is a very dangerous thing. You've got to be good enough. You have to be.
There's possibly apocryphal tale going around about certain footballers who are bought and they're known in the industry as T-shirts. They are from countries where there's a huge fan base for football, and players bought who never seem to quite make the first grade. They never make the cut. They maybe play a couple of Carling Cup games, but they bought purely just to sell merchandise in whatever country. Now, I don't know how true those stories are, but you see the number of shirt sales and you think, yeah, there's definitely something in it.
Yeah, and I think that's a horror story for sport, and where marketing really is overtaking what the core values of the sport are all about. You have to be good enough to play. It's as simple as that. You can never just be put in there as a project or to sell, as you say, T-shirts or to get a technology or a broadcast deal in a particular market. That's a really dangerous path that sport would go down.
So let's talk about culture for a bit. So you mentioned Newcastle Falcons. You have a dual role at the minute. You're consultancy, Newcastle Thunder, but also Newcastle Falcons, the rugby union team there. You've just done a piece of work about the culture for the whole club. Talk to us about the process behind that and why, I know you're a business leader in the organisation now, but why as a marketer do you think culture is important?
I think it's massive, and I think culture comes from a lot of sources and has a lot of inputs, but ultimately it's about the people, isn't it? The people set your culture. Culture isn't set by putting a few key buzzwords up on the wall and pointing at it and telling everybody that's how they've got to live their life. It comes from people and people having the right behaviours at the end of the day. The reason we brought it in with Thunder was, again, as a bit of background, Gateshead Thunder reformed after it went to Hull. It had a few highs, quite a lot of lows. Newcastle Rugby, who I consult to, bought the Thunder back in 2015. So it became part of bought Gateshead Thunder to become part of the Newcastle Rugby family. So we've gone on a period of growth over the last 4 or 5 years. Attendances have gone up sort of 5-6-fold on average, and we've played in front of 3,000 and 4,000 when they were playing in front of a couple of hundred at Gateshead Stadium. We've launched an academy. We're starting to produce our own players now of sufficient standard and quality. Everything about the club, the commercial about it, the level of play we've got in. We've got Dennis Betts, who's an ex-Great Britain international, as our director of rugby. We've gone through a period of incredible growth. The other side is we're heavily involved in growing the game at community level. And we're now up to 16 community clubs in the North East. It's the fastest growing area for rugby league development in the entire UK. So lots of really positive stuff going on. And what we found, what I sort of put to the team that we work with, it's quite a small team, is that, look, I think if I asked you what Thunder meant or what it represents, I think you'd all give a great answer. But you know what? I think we'd get half a dozen different answers. And I think if you ask the players, it means something else. And it's not about trying to get everybody, you have to think in this way. But what we did under our exercise, and we did it with an organisation called Cravens, who I've worked with over 20 years, who were an advertising and brand purpose organisation based in Newcastle. We just tried to bring all that good work together. And we just tried to give ourselves a direction that we're all going on. Because when things are going well, and actually when things aren't going well, organisations, I think, run the risk of just individuals when they're going off on their own tangent. So if it's not going well, they're trying to affect change. They're trying to make something happen. Or actually, if it's getting too difficult, they're just going off in a direction that's a bit easier and a direction they like to do rather than what they need to do. Or when it's going well, actually, people just get carried away and just think that they're part of this momentum and just can do what they want. So we just try to bring it all together, and we brought it together under a single focus of our mission, and which is to win Super League by 2030. Now we're at level 3 at the minute, so that's a pretty bold statement. It means in the next 10 years we've got to get promoted twice and win a competition that actually the most of Super League has never won.
Well, Jim Collins calls them big, hairy, audacious goals, or BHAGs. And all the best companies have them. These big, scary goals. If they don't scare you, they're not big enough. Yeah. That seems to be the general approach to it. So it seems like a real lofty ambition that you've got to be able to stretch to reach for. So I think it's great that you're approaching it in that way.
Yeah, it's particularly in sport. If you're not into winning at the highest level, then I question why you're there. And it could be argued that not just in rugby league, but a lot of sports, a lot of clubs just exist, and they take the money from centralised broadcast deals and from game receipts, and they do, but they're just existing. And if you're not going out to say that you want to win everything at the start of the year, then why are you in sport? And everything we do off the field, what we're trying to do is give the on-field teams, so the coaching staff and the players and the backup staff in physio and medical and S&C and analysis and all the rest. We're trying to give them the best chance to win. That doesn't just mean giving them the most money, although that helps, because I would argue that if myself and yourself, Andy, if you had £5 million to spend on a team and I had £10 million, the law of averages says if we're both reasonably proficient at our job, then I should win the competition more often than not than you, probably twice as many times. It doesn't work like that. And there's examples in all sports where clubs have had the biggest budgets and not ended up winning anything. And I would say that comes back to your culture point, because you can buy in lots of individual resources, players, the very latest video analysis systems. You can put it up. If you don't put it together in the right way, then you're not going to be successful. So, it's.
So, tell us. There's people listening to this and going, and probably comments people have said to us both in the past about sport marketing. It's just easy. You've got this great product. Everybody knows when it is. It just sells itself. You've got superstar A, superstar B. Local rivals come into play. It's easy sport marketing. What's your comeback to that?
Well, comeback it's probably one of the most difficult things because for two reasons. Number one, you never ever need to come to a sporting event in your life, and your life actually will be no worse or better off if you don't.
Probably be better off for most people.
Probably be better off, but you never need to come. Now, look, if I'm in the business of marketing, washing machines, or double glazing, or carpets, yeah, as dull as some of those categories might be. Apologies if you work in any of those, by the way, and you thoroughly enjoy your job. But as dull as they might be, people need them, right? So what you're trying to do is convince people that actually your carpet or your double glazing is better than your competitors, and for a variety of reasons. And effectively, that's marketing, isn't it? It's trying to make that connect with somebody and give them a reason to buy from you. Yeah. But you know that actually at some point, that family is going to need double glazing. It's going to need a car. It's going to need a washing machine, whatever it might be. Those are the essential. You don't need to come to sport. But what we're trying to do is persuade you that actually you do need sport in your life because it's got tremendous values. It's got such an experience that if you miss out, you really are missing out on something. Where else can you at the end of the week sit next to, obviously in different times now, but sit next to somebody you don't know. When your team scores in the last minute, jump up, high five, or even hug that person. If you did that in the street or in the office, you'd probably get arrested. Yeah. So we offer these fantastic opportunities, and what we're trying to get over to existing fans to stick with us, particularly when times aren't well, and new fans is look, you don't get that anywhere else. You got the cinema. You know that 99 times out of 100, the film's going to end well. It's the odd one that doesn't. I get that, but you know that the hero's going to come through. He's going to say he or she's going to save the day, and it'll last about 1 hour 40 minutes. You go to sport, you've no idea what's going to happen. Yeah. So again, as sport marketers, that's the other big factor. We've no control over what goes on the pitch. Mm-hmm. So the bounce of a ball, a bad refereeing decision, an injury, there's the weather. There's so many factors can come into play that means that your team doesn't perform as well as it could do or should do, and you lose the game. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That I love that it sells itself. Yeah, you show me anything in life that sells itself, because you know what's normally happened when you get to the point where you said it sells itself is an incredible amount of hard work, incredible amount of really good marketing, really good planning has got into the point where, and I still argue that it doesn't sell itself, but people can say it sells itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they're the lessons that I take from sport into, I barely work in sport now, the odd occasion, but the lessons I take and I share with clients these days are about controlling the controllables. When you're working in cricket, if it rains, there's no play. You could do everything you want and it's rained and the game doesn't even happen. So, you just have, you can control what you can control and don't worry about the rest of it. If the team's getting walloped every week, you can't control that. You just have to worry about doing the things you can control. What I want to do, jump into talking about the World Cup. So you've worked on a Rugby Union World Cup. You're currently working on a Rugby League World Cup. Slightly different approach to that, because obviously with your local domestic team, you're spending a whole amount of time building up, trying to sort of get people into the crescendo of that your team playing on a Sunday, every Sunday or whatever is the thing. World Cups are a little bit different. Did you approach it differently with that? Yeah,
they're different just because of the huge scale, and I think perhaps the other big event that I've worked on, which I've seen the most marketed way is the European Rugby final, so the Heineken Champions Cup final. We basically bought the rights to the final, or gave them a cash guarantee, and ran it as a club with our other partners from across the northeast, the Football Club, the City Council, and the NGI, the Regional Tourism Board. So big events are different because you spend a couple of years, 4 years building up to a very short window of games, and you'll only know sort of really when tournament comes whether you've been successful or not in everything you set out to do. Week to week sport is different, and the great thing about sport, and this happens on the field and off the field as well, if something goes wrong, if something's not right, you can pretty quickly correct it. You've got 7 days usually to correct it and put it right. So that's especially true for on the field, but off the field as well. If we've got a problem in a particular area, well, we can get it fixed by the next home game. And if we don't, then we don't deserve to be successful. So World Cups and big tournaments like that, or one-off big finals, if you don't get it right on the day, there's no second chance. And I think that's the That's the biggest difference. So the level of detail and planning that goes into it is significantly more. And I just think so. You get a different type of fan turning up as well. So, fans to your week to week are primarily the vast majority have been there, on previous occasions for many years. For major finals or major events like that, most of the fans who turn up have probably never been to the city before or never been to that stadium before. So they come without a level of expectation that a week-to-week fan has. But at the same time, do they have a higher level of expectation because it is such a big event? So it's a really interesting challenge.
And was it the biggest crowd for the European Cup final that they've ever had? Am I making that figure up?
No, we had the fastest selling final ever. So there have been bigger crowds, obviously, in bigger stadium, but we sold out 52,000 St James's Park. But we'd sold it out by effectively the January before the final in May. So all available tickets had gone. There was some hospitality left. There was some premium tickets left. And then we had the two finalists. So the two finalists. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to balance a message then of the game sold out. However, we had another game on the Friday night, which was the challenge. This is the second tier final. So for those perhaps more familiar with football, it's a bit like playing the Champions League final and the Europa Cup final on the same weekend in the same city. So on the Friday night, we played the Challenge Cup. Now that very much had availability. So we were trying to get this message right that yes, it's sold out. However, one of the games hasn't sold out. So actually the event hasn't sold out, but it was, you had to be really clear in your communication. We're trying to push people towards the secondary event when a lot of them really wanted to come for the what you would say is the main course. I'd like to think we succeeded. We got 28,000 on a Friday night, which was a UK record attendance. And we had two French teams in the final, and between them, they only sold 700 tickets, so they weren't great travellers. So we sold 27,500 tickets effectively to people from across the region and to fans that were coming on the Saturday as well. So it was a communication there was tricky, and I think it really highlighted to me as well how clear you've got to be with your communication. You've not got to get carried away too much with the PR and your successes, because actually by talking about this effectively sold out Saturday main event, we were detracting from the fact that you still had tickets that were available on the Friday night, and we still wanted people to buy them.
Good stuff. So you've got the Rugby League World Cup coming up in 2021.
Yes, October next year.
And there's Newcastle is becoming, because of the work you're doing through Thunder, but also the Magic Weekend and other events like that. So there's a big game coming to the Northeast. What's the plans to build up to that?
Well, the plans have started now. So I work as a consultant to Rugby League World Cup 2021. I was part of the city's bid to host. We went for the opening game. So we actually asked for England in the opening game on the 23rd of October, and we were successful in that. Subsequently as well, because a stadium that was promised over in Cumbria isn't now being built, there were 3 additional games that we managed to get to Kingston Park, which is the home of Thunder and Falcons, which is a far smaller stadium that holds 10,000. So we've now got 3 additional games, group games, that will be announced in the next couple of months. So we do know that we're playing England v Samoa as the opening game, and the target is to sell every single seat. Is to sell 52,000, because in any major tournament that is played over a number of games and rounds, when you switch on that first game, you want to see it full, because what that indicates is a really successful tournament and something that's going to be big. And as human beings, we're attracted by success. We want to be part of things that are popular, and we gravitate towards them. So it's massively important that we sell out that first game and present live on BBC One England v Samoa, kicking off the Rugby League World Cup in Newcastle, perhaps not a traditional area. A really excited crowd. A whole weekend of activities with fan zones and a second game on the Sunday at Kingston Park. So a real festival for the sport to kick off with, and hopefully then that continues throughout the tournament.
Brilliant. So looking back then, as we're coming sort of towards the last lap of the show, what advice do you have for younger marketers? So in fact, I'm going to rephrase that. What advice do you wish somebody had given you 20 years ago when you first stepped into rugby and sport marketing?
Personally, I think it would have been to get au fait with technology, because I think data now and analytics in particular and the way that we get that data is absolutely crucial. It's it's far less on a finger in the air like that, and far more about what trends are doing, and then by putting a bit of creative and a bit of art behind the science, then we come up with great marketing solutions. So you've probably said, my camera's gone off halfway through this thing, so I'm staring at a blank screen at the minute. I believe.
No, yeah, I think you're still here. I can still see you.
Anyway. It just shows what a technophobe I am. I probably think that has held me back a tiny bit in my sort of career. Not too much, I hope. But yeah, definitely to get more off air with technology, I think.
Okay, and you've moved you're still doing marketing and in your consultancy, you're still there advising as well as sort of in leadership roles. But how do you stay in touch with changes and trends in marketing? Do you read anyone in particular? Do you keep your finger on the pulse that way?
I don't sort of read big marketing books. I will go online and look at things. The biggest thing I do, and we benefit from this in sport, and perhaps other sectors can't do it, is I talk a hell of a lot to other clubs and other sports and other consultants about what they're seeing out there, what good things they're doing, So I've been over to the States, I've been to Australia, I've looked at clubs across Australian Rugby League, Rugby Union, Aussie Rules Football, the soccer league over there. I've been to meet the NFL, the basketball, the baseball, loads of different clubs and teams across lots of different sports, because do you know what? There's not a lot of new ideas out over there, but it's how people apply them to their own local markets. I'm particularly interested in what I would call challenger sports, because let's be fair, if you're an NFL team in New York, again, I'm not saying it sells itself, but if you're the Giants, you've got 100 years of history there. You regularly sell out 70,000. That's a good position to be in. Can I learn much about that for Thunder or Falcons? Odd bits. But what I'd rather do is I'd rather go down the road to the Long Island Ducks baseball team that sells out 6,000 capacity stadium week in, week out, and look at some of the techniques they're using. I found that far, no disrespect to the Giants and the Jets, far more valuable to me, because it was pitched more at my level. Guess what? Ring people up, and particularly within sports as well. We love talking. You've probably got that from me over this last 34 minutes. We love talking about our successes as well, and we're quite happily share that with a lot of people. So I don't really read a lot. I go on the internet a bit, but I listen to other people. Find it invaluable.
In terms of training for marketers coming through, and when you're interviewing people, is there anything you look for in a marketer when you're recruiting them, and is there anything you think should be compulsory in training for younger marketers?
If I was going to say anything in training, I don't know whether you can include this in training, but I really do think that people should spend some time on what I would call the product line. So if you're selling tickets, effectively, you really need to go into the ticket office and understand how it works. Yeah, because I think if you fully understand a product, you're going to have far more success in your marketing career within it. So if you are going to get a job such as a marketing manager or a brand manager at a washing machine manufacturer, go down on the product line, fully understand what's happening down there, what your product is, why it's presented that way, why it's priced that way. So really get to grips with that, because I feel that's the more insight you have into your product, the better you're going to be as a marketer.
Yeah, no, good answer. I know in retail they're big fans of getting senior managers out into the shop floors sometimes. So just to see and to talk to customers firsthand. I think so many marketers are shielded in offices away from customers and don't necessarily hear that voice. You're talking about Mickey Ward and you going down talking to the season ticket holders. Just hearing that firsthand is sometimes a really, really empowering experience.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So one last question, then I'm asking everybody this. What question should I have asked you that I didn't?
I don't know. I think and a lot of the time we talk about successes, and we've all had failures, haven't we, as well? So I think it's really what can you learn from your failures or the things that go wrong? Because when I was comfortable, often talking about things that go wrong, but I think the more honest we are with ourselves and with others about why things didn't work, perhaps the better we'll be down the line.
I think you've just introduced a new question for every future show. When I worked at Durham County Cricket Club, Yvette Thompson, who I worked with, we ended up having a little wall at the side of us, which we called the Wall of Shame, where we would stick up several things or put in letters from people, experiences that had gone wrong, just to keep it real and to remember what had happened.
Yeah.
So, what is the biggest cock-up you've been involved in that you're allowed to talk about?
I would have to say, you'll love this. So I don't know if you remember Russ Abbott from the sort of 80s and 90s. You might be a bit young, Andy, but Russ Abbott used to have these 3 or 4 ladies on that were called, I think they were called the Roly Polies. I mean, you just wouldn't get away with it now. They were larger ladies and they used to sing as part of the show. And we got them as part of pre-match entertainment with the Falcons once. And first of all, you're looking at it going, well, sort of know your audience. You know, a rugby union crowd really isn't probably going to be watching sort of Russ Abbott and thinking it's great. So I think knowing your audience there. But we put them on the pitch and look, they were great people and they could actually sing a bit and move around a bit. And they started to sing, but we had a microphone. We hadn't tested it beforehand. And it was basically an audio mic. So whenever the announcers spoke into it, the music in the background would cut out. And it's part of a safety feature, but just to be more clear as well. Of course, they'd start singing into these 2 microphones that we'd got them. And as soon as they start singing, the music would cut out. So you're halfway through sort of dancing around on the pitch in front of bemused fans. All you can hear is, I can't hear the music, I can't hear the music. It's cutting out. It was just an absolute disgrace. And I've got to hold my hand up. It was all my idea. I was the one that booked them. I thought it'd go down a storm. And do you know what? You've got to know your audience, haven't you? Just because you think something's going to be hilarious or funny or entertaining does not mean that everybody else will as well. So really, the second you forget about your audience and you're doing it because you want to be quirky or you think it's a great design or advertising idea, you've lost it. Yeah.
Brilliant. What a way to finish. Mick Hogan, thank you very much. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best channel? LinkedIn, perhaps?
Yeah, LinkedIn or Twitter at Mick Hogan too. Yeah, any of those I check quite regularly.
We'll put your details in the show notes underneath anyway. So, Mick, thank you very much for your time. That's been fantastic. And we'll talk again. Thank you.
Cheers. See you soon.
Once again, Mick Hogan, thank you very much. Mick, the early days of lockdown, as he mentioned, he's a bit of a technophobe. So he's got the laptop on his knee. The video is not ideal. The audio quality is not great. But dig into what he says and have a listen to that. A couple of things stood out for me. Fan engagement. Now, if you are in the sports world, you've got fans, you've got stakeholders. It used to be that all clubs were kind of really close to the fans. In some sports, that distance is separating. But actually, what Mick's advocating for there is talking to your fans, talking to the people who love your brand. Extrapolate that out of the sports world for a minute and just think about what that means to you as your company. Are you talking to the end users, to the people who are paying the money for the product? Because this is another big bugbear of mine in marketing, but specifically in digital marketing. We're obsessed with analytics. We're obsessed with CRO, conversion rate optimization, and watching what happens all the way up to the point of purchase. And then even maybe some post-purchase stuff. Can we get them to upsell? What about customer loyalty? Can we get them to come back? Can we get them into an email program to get them to refer stuff? Yeah. And we need to be obsessed about that stuff. Is anybody actually talking to them about using your product once they've got it and gone home? What do they think of it? How are they using it? What difference does it make to their lives? Yeah, okay, when we sometimes nod to getting testimonials and stuff like that, but are we actually really looking at what difference our product makes to them? And therefore, we can use that back into our marketing in the future. And that's the same thing when Mick talked about being in Wigan and having the fans forum. That's all they're doing is listening to the users and feeding that into their process. And another interesting point, talks about launching Gateshead Thunder. Some real interesting stuff about startups and kind of embedded in communities and stuff like that, which maybe there's a bit of a leap to take that into other worlds, but certainly it's interesting the fact that the Rugby Football League, 20-ish years after launching Gateshead Thunder and then merging them a year later, I'm sad to say, look, I'm an expansionist when it comes to rugby league, and I was really pleased to see Toronto join the competition. Not probably the best geography, but I don't think anyone expected COVID to come along. But Toronto's demise, they've had to pull out of the league because of various reasons. And will they be back next year? Will they be in the Super League? Will they be in the First Division, Second Division? Nobody really knows, right? But actually, some of the lessons that I think happened 20 years ago at Gateshead Thunder could have been used to foresee some of the problems. I think rugby league probably needs to expand. but I'm not sure Toronto's the right place to do that. But that's a debate for another day. Little bit of advice to his 20-year-old self was learn about the tech. I think that's probably a generational thing. I'll be kind to Mick. He's of a slightly older vintage than I am, but it's true. You've got to be able to stay on top of the technology. But my favourite thing, the Rugby League World Cup has just announced their fixtures, and England launch against Samoa. Real big ambition there from Mick. We want to sell out 52,000 for the opening game of the Rugby League World Cup in Newcastle. If you are not a rugby league fan, you won't necessarily understand that rugby league isn't a huge game in Newcastle. You'll know the football club Newcastle United, the Toon, massive. Rugby Union, bigger. They play in front of crowds of somewhere between 8 and 12,000, I believe. The rugby league team play in front of a couple of thousand. So this is a big stage. This is a big step. International rugby league is usually played in front of 25, 30,000 in places like Wigan, Hull, Huddersfield, Leeds. This is sort of doubling the crowd in a place that's not normal. But why? Because you've got to start at the B of the bang. You've got to start strong. Grandstand, big Saturday afternoon game, live on terrestrial TV. That's a big ambition. And all the things he talks about, the challenges of working on event marketing compared to working on week-to-week sport come into play there. But I really hope that they do it. Not just because I'm a big rugby league fan, but I think it'll be huge for the area. When the Magic Weekend's been in Newcastle before, it has a really different feel to the city too. Football fans tend to be kept apart. They keep in their tribes because there's been a history of fighting and trouble. Rugby fans all congregate together, and it brings a real collegiate feel to the city. So I really hope it works well for not just for Mick, but not just for the World Cup, but for the city of Newcastle as well, which I am, as you know, if you're a listener, I'm an ex-resident and invested in the city. I love the place. Right. Enough of me waffling. Please do get in touch on social media. Let me know what you think of the show. I'm Andy Jarvis, with Andy with an I. So please reach out and get in touch, or just post it in the comments on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Just find me somewhere and tell me what you think of the show. Next week, it's not next week, sorry. The show comes out every 2 weeks, so you don't need to worry about next week. But got another guest from the world of broadcast media. It's Zaid Al-Kassab, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Channel 4. Already done the interview, really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you in a couple of weeks' time. But until then, please do rate the show, give it 5 stars if you liked it. If you didn't like it, still give it 5 stars, but then tell me why you hated it, or subscribe on YouTube. Thank you, and goodbye.